I'm Nikita. I'm a doula.
And I'm Lola, and I'm a midwife.
So, we're going to talk about today what doulas are and how they work with midwives. Is that about right, Lola? Is that our chat today?
That's about right. So we kind of wanted to start a series of blogs where we talk about things like induction of labor, breastfeeding, all the sort of questions that you might have if you're expecting a baby, if you're thinking of getting pregnant. And so we thought we'd start the first one off with a general sort of chat, like an informal interview between us, really. So you can get to know a little bit about what we do. Does that sound about right, Nikita?
That's exactly correct, yeah. So, Lola,
So, go
you
ahead.
are a midwife on the NHS?
I am indeed, yes. Do you want me to talk a little bit about how I actually got into this,
Yeah,
or I don't know if
good.
anybody's interested?
Let's do that. Tell everyone exactly
Okay,
what you do and how you do it.
okay. So, I got into midwifery quite by chance, to be honest. I started off wanting to be a doctor. So my background is I am Nigerian, and I think if anybody knows, um, when you come from that background, you usually come from a background of academia, and I was very good at sciences, so I was pushed towards the sciences. And I think to that extent, my thought of a career was medicine. And then I moved to the UK in 96. And while I was doing my A levels, I was figuring out what I wanted to do. And it suddenly occurred to me that, to be honest with you, I wasn't really sure if I wanted to spend the next 6 years in school. So I sort of thought maybe I would do physiotherapy. Had a little look around with that, and didn't find that I was getting very much support from physiotherapists in general. And then one day in the middle of my A level class, a friend of mine said to me, well, you know what, I think you'd be really good as a midwife. We're watching a video on midwives at the time. And I remember thinking to myself that even when I was thinking of being a doctor, I really wanted to do something with women and pregnancy and childbirth. So I looked into midwifery, and I thought it was really for me. I applied, and I got into university. I qualified in 2003. So this year in October, no, September actually, next month will make me 17 years qualified, which seems really impossible because it seems like yesterday. Um, I really, really enjoy my job. I really enjoy the birth side of things as well. I love supporting women during labour and birth. And at the moment, I'm working in a birth centre across two NHS sites, actually, one in North London and one in South London. And that's me, really. So I'm going to fire that question back at you and say, what made you become a doula?
Okay, well, I had my first child 12 years ago, and I had an awful experience, to say the least. I was in labour for nearly 24 hours, induction, all that rubbish, epidural, von tooth delivery. And after I had her, I thought, this can't be normal. And I'm not having it that it could be normal. It's just not possible. So I started to look into what I think should have happened, and I came across the path of being a doula, and I found a course near where I live, and I met Kiki Hansard, who is an incredible woman, an incredible doula, and I trained under Nurturing Birth, and I qualified in 2009. Then I wanted to go into midwifery to see the other side of the coin because, well, let me explain what a doula is really. So a doula is an experienced doula is a natural birth expert. They should be, at least. They know everything about normality. They do not perform medical tasks like midwives, so we don't, take blood pressure or perform anything like an episiotomy and nothing like that. We're there for a completely normal birth and support and information for women while they're pregnant, during birth, and postnatally as well. So I went into midwifery because I wanted to see the other side of the coin. Unfortunately, I I didn't like the state of midwifery at the time I was training. It had become way too medical for me. Birth was no longer normal. It was standard for women to have all these procedures, which I didn't deem necessary at all. So I didn't think I would be able to stick it out without being fired. So I left and I pursued my career as a doula and a childbirth educator, and I used to write blogs. I've written for AIMS, and I'm just basically supporting women and have been for the last 12 years now.
So as a doula, what would you say you enjoy the most about being a doula?
I absolutely love empowering women, um, giving them the information for them to make an informed decision, and not telling them what to do, and also letting them know that no one else can tell them what to do, be it doctor, midwife, husband. It's about them. I love empowering women and making them understand that they are the birthing lioness and the birthing goddess that they are, and like helping them the most is doing very little, to be honest. I mean, I'm talking on the birth sense of things. Don't have to interfere, very hands off, standing back, giving them space, protecting their space, and just being a supportive woman role for them, and to know that they can do it, and just to give them as much information as possible. Really, that's what I love. And I don't have to get involved in the medical side of things, because again, it's all the natural process that I always talk about and embrace. So yeah, that's my favorite part of being a doula, just empowerment for women.
Is there anything that you don't like about being a doula?
um yeah, I suppose it's a problem. It's not a problem for me now, because I'm only doing home births for this reason. The biggest problem is, and I'm sure we'll go more into detail about this later, is being in hospital and the relationship with midwives and doulas. That's the worst part. That I kind of feel, I've been made to feel sometimes that I'm on their turf and I'm trying to interfere. I'm not. I'm just an advocate, but I don't do hospital births anymore for that reason. I mean, one, the people that come to me genuinely trust their bodies and they want to do it at home, and two, it's too much for me. I'd rather just be on their turf, in their environment, not have to go anywhere else. Of course, if they have to transfer, then that's what I'll do. But that's the worst part. So same question to you, what do you love and dislike about being a midwife?
So I think if I was going to answer that question, I think I'd probably answer that question in relation to being a midwife on the NHS, maybe.
Okay.
So, I mean, what I love about the job is at the moment, I am where I want to be, which is a birth center. So it is for women who have midwifery care, which means that I don't, in our team, we don't get any disturbance from the doctors. We transfer up if there is a problem. To be honest, I think that should be the same whether the women are on a birth center or a labor ward. I think there needs to be probably a little bit more distinction about midwives being the experts in normality and the doctors being the experts when things go wrong. And I think in my training, even on the main delivery suite, when I trained all those years ago, the midwives were still trusted with the women who didn't have any complications, who just wanted to be on the delivery suite. Because, it is about choice at the end of the day. Some women feel the safest when they're in the hospital with all the medical team, and some people feel the safest when they're at home and they don't have any medical support there. So I think what I'm finding a bit difficult is sometimes when you go up to the delivery suites in any hospital, that even women who are medically uncomplicated, there's still that obstetric led care where I feel personally, it may not be the truth, but I feel personally that as a midwife, I am not trusted. Like my judgment is not trusted, even in that normality. So I would say that's probably what I don't like about it, is that underlying thing of my judgment not being trusted, where I feel like I would never stand over a doctor while they were doing something that I know they are medically capable of and question them. So I think on the whole, it's that mistrust. So, it's when you hear sometimes doctors they might think they're making a joke, but when they say things like, oh, the birth center, is that where all the women go and get third-degree tears? I think, well, that's not funny, but also it kind of makes me think that in a roundabout way, it's like, you don't trust us, but you kind of, well, we have to let them do it because otherwise, they'll only moan. And I know it's not like that. I know that actually, I think it just comes from the fact that there isn't a proper distinction of the roles, that when something is completely uncomplicated, it should be left in the hands of the midwife, regardless of where the woman wants to give birth. And vice versa, if something is not uncomplicated and if there are medical issues, then the doctors do need to be involved. So I think that's what I don't like about my job. I think what I really like about my job is just being with women, to be honest, supporting them. I love to talk. So when it comes to things like education, I can do that. I would just like to put out there that I don't talk in the middle of a birth. And actually, one of my friends, I had looked after a woman, and one of my friends then took after the woman had her baby, and she was trying to remember my name, and she was given a description. And my friend said, "Oh, I know who you're talking about. You're talking about Lola. She talks a lot." And the women went, "No." Because obviously I'd looked after this woman during labor. So I'm not going to stand there chatting at this woman all the way through her labor. I'm going to be very, really quiet. So I said to my friend, "What made you think that I would be chatting all the way through your labor?" And she said, "Well, to be honest with you, I didn't really think that. It's just that, you know, you do talk a lot." So that was the first thing that came to mind. And then I thought, actually, you wouldn't have been talking in the middle of a labor.
What's your experience with working with doulas and the relationship between the two?
So I think it's really interesting, actually, because I totally get that stereotype that you spoke about turning on the lights, loud voices, loud this, loud that, you know. But I think my experience of working with doulas is mostly positive. But I think I also experience what you're saying about that whole territorial thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that because of some of the things that women have gone through by coming into hospital, and some of the stories that get put out there, that I don't know if this is the right choice of words, but sometimes I think the doulas and the couples come in already like ready for a fight, if that makes any sense.
Oh, 100%.
Like they see it as a battleground that they have to sort of get through, and actually they come in with that judgment that whoever they're going to meet is going to be difficult. So I would say on a personal level, I find that very hurtful, because I'm not that person. I'm not saying that there aren't those people around there, but I'm not that person. But I think generally I have only had 2 doulas that I got a negative vibe off, that didn't particularly go away, that actually just left me feeling a bit hurt. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's not really about me. I can be hurt and it's fine, as long as a woman gets what she wants. But I think sometimes it's nice to not have that prejudgment that every midwife that you're going to meet is going to be horrible and doesn't understand normal birth. So
I completely
I
agree.
can think,
It doesn't matter how
yeah,
many experiences, how many bad experiences I've had with midwives in the past. Every time I've gone into hospital, I've gone in with a blank slate, because you have to, because there are midwives like you know,
yeah,
and I have had some
yeah,
wonderful experiences where we've, you know, it's been a joint share of the care, and it's been wonderful. Like I said, I've had a few bad experiences as well,
yeah.
but you can't go in with that preconception, otherwise it won't work.
I just wanted to elaborate on that last part about,
Yeah.
you know, sometimes maybe just leaving our judgments about each other, midwife and doula, at the door, with a birth story, if I may.
Go for it.
And it had been one of those really manic days. So I think you know, we'd already me and my colleague had already had, I think, 3 births on the birth center, and I had been lucky to be involved in 2 of them, and she had been involved with 1. And then there was a lady who'd phoned, her doula had phoned to say she was coming in, and my colleague said, you know, "I will take the next lady because you've had a couple and it's really busy and you need to sit down and just get a break." And I said, "Fine." And then, of course, as it happened, she then ended up going into to the other lady that she'd looked after earlier, who had buzzed for something. And then the couple turned up with their doula at the door. So I walked them in, and you could clearly see this woman was hypnobirthing. You could clearly see she was about to just push this baby out. So they came up the corridor, and all, you know, just automatically there was just that, I would say, like, hostility from the doula. And they went into the room, and the doula went right up to the pool and turned on the pool and said she wants a water birth. And I thought, that's fine, but, you know, I still, you know, like you were saying with doulas, they don't perform any medical tasks. I'm not an independent midwife who is doing her own thing. I'm still employed by a birth center in a hospital, and I still need to do my basic things, which is to feel the baby and have a listen in. She doesn't have to lie flat on the bed for that, but I do need to do that. And if she doesn't want me to do that, I need to hear from her that that's not acceptable. So already my nose was completely put out of joint, but I just, I don't show my emotions on my face. I'm normally sort of like fuming inside, but I think this is really not about me. So I did say, do you think it would be okay if we just listened into the baby before you get into the pool? So she gave her consent for that, and that was fine. And she gave her consent, and she gave birth to this baby. But once that had happened, so she gave birth to the baby, and I really didn't say anything at all because she was doing everything by herself. So I didn't really feel the need to do anything. The doula and the partner had said to just listen in when I wanted to, or where I felt that I needed to listen in. So I wasn't really communicating. Just a couple of times when she felt like she was maybe about to lose it, I just said things like, just listen to your body, and that was it. And then I was silent for most of the time. And then this baby came out, and then it was just like the mood completely changed. It was all light and cheerful and all of that. And I felt the need to say thank you to the doula because I felt like she'd given her support to the woman. And as much as I wasn't particularly on board with the vibe I was getting off her, I knew that she was just really protecting the woman, and that was fine. And she said, no, thank you to you too, because you let them. And I thought that's such an awful way to think of the midwives, because she'd obviously come in thinking they are not going to let her do anything. So I'm here to protect her, which I think is true. But I just get really upset about being tarred with that brush, because I think, do you know what? Maybe we are few and far between, but there are some of us that exist, so yeah, so that one always stuck with me. Like, I can, even in my head, I can still see the couple. I know exactly what they look like and exactly what the doula looks like. But it never left me, because I thought, I know they were really happy with my care, but what I think is upsetting is they will probably go away being really surprised that they had this care on the NHS, and I think it shouldn't have to be that way.
Would you ever consider becoming an independent midwife?
No. Well, to be honest with you, I think not necessarily an independent midwife. I think what I would like to do, I think for me, what I'm beginning to realize is how little support people have postnatally. So I think I would really like to be in a position, if I was going to practice anything independently, it would be antenatal education and postnatal care. I think I would stick to that. I would say, if I was going to just answer that question as a yes or no answer, I'd say no. But then thinking about it, I think when I think about where women need support, I really strongly believe in education in any way, shape, or form. And actually, when you educate women and they are confident enough that they have the information, that they are more likely to birth confidently, they are more likely to birth without need of any medical intervention. So it's a win-win, isn't it, for the woman, for the NHS in terms of like financial issues and all of that. So I think if I was going to do it, I would do something to do with antenatal education and postnatal care, because I think postnatal care, again, is where we fall short a little bit. We've had to cut back on a lot of, I think, between now, when I had my first, who is going to be 12 in a few weeks, and my last, who's 4, I can see the difference in the postnatal care that I got. So I think I would do something postnatally, definitely. I think also, just in view of all the recent events with Black Lives Matter and the fact that women of color are more likely to maybe get substandard care, I would maybe want to do something that supports our community as well. And ironically, just as a sort of like, to see what would happen, I did put out the fact that, I was a midwife, and if anybody wanted some additional information, to get back to me on a social media website. And I got response from a lot of women from that community, and actually had one woman, her opening line was, because I am more likely to die, I do not want to go into hospital. I'm planning a home birth. And it kind of broke my heart a little bit because, you know, it's been a bit difficult. You know, I think that as midwives and as medical professionals, we are human first and foremost. So whatever views we would have had outside of that, I think sometimes we carry into our profession. And I think you have a lot of people who think that we don't have a problem and this is all a big storm in a teacup. And you have a lot of people who think we do have a problem. How are we going to go forward? And we have a lot of people who are just like on the fence and they don't know why or what they're going to do about it. And so when I saw that email, when she started off by saying, because I am more likely to die, I think, gosh, there are a lot of women out there that are probably thinking that. And she's bold enough to say that actually I've taken this on board, that going in here, I am more likely to die than somebody who isn't of color. So I think I would definitely like to be involved in some kind of education and some kind of postnatal care. So I guess the long-winded answer to that question is, in the future, I can see myself doing something independently, yes.
Are they able to give women the care that an independent midwife can? And that's why I suppose people hire doulas alongside NHS care.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note that whether it's right or wrong, because I know in the past, when I remember years ago when I was at Watford and they were trying to introduce caseloading, and they were dividing the midwives into teams, and it was going to be a case of, you know, you had your teams, you had your women, and actually there was only going to be a few midwives that were in the hospital because everybody would be in charge of their women. So when those women then went into labor, you just came in with them. So it's only going to be, I guess, like a skeletal staff for emergencies. And then they sort of talked about it, and I think they had actually divided everybody up into teams, but it never sort of took up, really. I think what's interesting to acknowledge in all of this is, you know, how I was saying about, you know, at the end of the day, we're all humans. I think there are some people that actually don't want to work that way. They want to come into a birth center or a labor ward or an antenatal ward or a postnatal ward, and they want to do their shifts for the day and look after their women to the best of their knowledge and then go home at the end of the day. And I think from the woman's point of view, that might not be ideal, but from the midwife's point of view, that might be the way they want to practice. So it's difficult because I think within that, there's no right or wrong. I don't see, it's not that I don't support caseloading. I think what I don't particularly like, not with caseloading, just with anything in particular, is I want to be in a position where the women that I'm looking after have that education and that confidence that if for some reason I wasn't there at any aspect of their pregnancy or their birth, it wouldn't matter. I don't want to create a dependency on me, because I think that in itself it shows a little bit of an arrogance that you are taking control of that woman's responsibility. Yeah. So I'm not saying that happens with caseloading, but I think sometimes when I wouldn't want to be in a position where I'm creating dependency. Do you understand what I mean?
I do. Like I get that myself.
Yeah. I want the women to just be, I want the women to just be confident regardless of whether I was there or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And also going back to what we were saying earlier about, you know, you wish you could work as an independent midwife without having to charge that amount of money. But it's the same goes for doulas as well. I mean, a lot of midwives and doulas will do pro bono work, but I wanted to make a point as well. I have a lot of inquiries from ladies who would love a doula, but the first thing they say is, it's for the rich. And I wanted to say, no, it's not just for that. There is the Doula Access Fund that people on a means tested basis who are on universal credit, they can apply, and a doula will be provided for them. And I think that information needs to be more accessible, because so many women would like that.
Yeah.
If they can't afford an independent midwife, they want a doula, it can be provided for them. And ask, you know, if you don't ask, you don't get. So many women.
Absolutely. If you don't ask, you don't get. Yeah.
And that don't work with Doula UK, so therefore they can't be used on the Doula Access Fund. But ask, they might do pro bono work. So always ask. And the same with midwives.
You know, like I said, absolutely. I think that what independent midwives and doulas charge is absolutely necessary.
Yes.
um, the only fear that I would have is somebody thinking they couldn't afford to do it, and like you say, then choosing not to actually access that service. I think that's, you know, that's not right. You should always ask and see what can be provided for you. um, but yeah, you know, so so finally I wanted to, that my final question would be, I don't know if we've sort of covered this, but I guess we haven't covered this particular question because it's quite specific. But as a doula, what would you like to say to midwives, really? What would be your message to them? Or if you could give a final parting word, what would you say?
Carry on doing an amazing job. Women rely on midwives, to get through the most poignant time in their life. And for the most part, midwives are incredible and doing the most amazing job. So carry on doing what you're doing. I'd say one more thing I would say is, don't be discouraged by stroppy doulas. Just don't, just do your job. Like you said, there's no right or wrong. There's no right or wrong way to birth, so therefore there's no right or wrong way of midwifery care. Some women like being looked after by someone who's very medicalized, and that's what they want from a birth, or they want to go to an obstetrician. But there is no right or wrong. If you want a very natural birth, you come to people like me, or an independent midwife, or a birth center, or you stay at home and have a free birth. So there's no right way. I wouldn't say anything to a midwife, you're doing your job wrong, blah, blah, blah. No way. They're doing the job completely right. But, just carry on doing what you're doing. That is all I have to say. What about you? The same question goes to doulas.
I think I would echo that back, is that I would say, if I was going to say anything to doulas, is to, as much as I know that the relationship between midwives and doulas it can sometimes be a bit strained, is to try, as difficult as it might be, to come in without judgment or without an assumption that midwives are going to be a certain way. And I think, to be fair, I think doulas always remember that they're in it for the women. But I think sometimes just the language and the tone from both sides, midwives as well at doulas, can be a little bit aggressive. And I think we need to check ourselves sometimes and think, in the middle of all of this, there is a woman. And a woman and her family who are just wanting someone to support them through their pregnancy and their birth. So I think for me, it would be to leave everything that we have at the door. And also just a little something that's maybe a little bit more specific is to understand as well with things like consent. I know, especially when women are hypnobirthing, or even if they're not hypnobirthing, but they just don't want to be drawn into a conversation, it can sometimes leave us in a really difficult situation when a woman comes in and her birth plan is saying, please do not direct any questions at me, please direct them to my partner or the doula. Because again, I am not that person that comes in with bright lights and says, so how long have you been contracting for? When did your waters break? I can see when someone is in established labor. I don't need to have that conversation with them. But if it comes to me potentially putting my hands on the mum to feel her tummy or to listen into the baby, it's a little bit, there are very blurry lines of consent if I'm being told to direct the question to the doula and the partner. So that is something to consider in terms of like writing your birth plan. You can say, I really don't want to have a chat when I come in. So if it's something to do with consent, the mum absolutely has to consent herself.
It needs to be.
And if it's something to do with, something that she doesn't have to answer, it's fair enough, you can ask the doula. But I'd also argue, is it really, if you're not asking the woman, do you really need to ask the question in the first place? Yeah, sure. But I think for me, that's always one thing that I find a bit difficult. But again, I've never personally had any problems with it, but it is something that comes up when we chat about it with other midwives, about the whole, please don't talk to me, talk to my husband or talk to my partner and the doula. Because actually for us, when it comes to consenting for things, that is something that we find difficult.
What advice would you give to anyone wanting to become a midwife?
Don't do it. No, I think so. The advice that I would give to somebody becoming a midwife is just do a lot of reading about what midwives are, what they're supposed to be about. I would absolutely encourage everybody to read about midwives across the globe. And I mean midwives in rural areas. I would actually ask people to read about the history of midwifery, where it came from, how women went through their pregnancies and their births years before women started birthing in hospital, and to understand that really that is the essence of midwifery. That is what you are training to be. I have said this so many times to student midwives who maybe come into it thinking it'd be really cool to deliver babies, and then they start off by seeing a lot of obstetrically led stuff, and they get very confident in that area, and then when you have them on the birth center, they're either not as confident or they're actually a bit bored, because when you think about it, it's about just sitting quietly in the corner sometimes and not doing anything. It's not about putting up 17 drips, you know, and being busy in that respect. It's being busy in a different way. So I would implore everyone to think about that, because I've always said to a lot of students, whether you like it or not, you are here to be the expert in normality. You might not like that. I know that there are midwives who fare better by looking after women who are medically high risk. That's fine. That is also part of our job. You know, that is part of our job to do that. If somebody is ill within their pregnancy, as a midwife, you are still qualified to look after that person. That is part of your job. But the whole essence of midwifery is being with women. So even when you have somebody who's upstairs on a drip, they can still bounce around on a bouncy ball. They don't have to be strapped onto the bed. You can hold the monitor onto their tummy as they walk around. It's about being with women. And so you really need to do a lot of reading, watch lots of positive videos about definitely the history of midwifery, I would say.
Yeah.
Because I think at the moment we're at a point where things are beginning to become so medicalized that it's the art of that midwifery is beginning to be a little bit lost, I would say. Not completely, but a little bit
Well, I
lost.
mean, things like breech birth and stuff, that's becoming a lost art.
What's that?
Breech, vaginal breech.
What's breech?
Oh, you don't even know what that is anymore, Lena? Of course not, no. Yeah, well, my point exactly, yeah. So I would agree with everything you just said. Like,
Yeah,
I would, same for people wanting to become, well, anything in the birth world, really, you know, doula, midwife, you know, research the history of the job,
yeah,
and know you're going in it for the right reasons, to support women,
absolutely,
not to take control and
absolutely.
make it a medical procedure. That's for obstetricians. Mhm.
So I just wanted to say, if you've enjoyed this little talk, then watch out for the other topics that we'll be covering, me and Nikita, and give us a like on our social media, and hopefully we'll see you next time.
Ta-ta.
Bye.